Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Alicia, and I am the Artistic Director at Peninsula School of Art in Fish Creek, Wisconsin. I am honored to introduce our newest artists in residence, Jonah Gebka and Cristen Shea. Jonah and Cristen are with us for a total of 6 weeks in an immersive studio experience that prioritizes time and space for them to engage fully in their creative practice, experiment, and pursue new projects and ideas. Today, we have the opportunity to get to know each of them through brief image presentations. First, we'll hear from Jonah. Jonah Gebka is a painter based in Munich, Germany. Drawing on everyday observations as well as found imagery, his paintings are concerned with the sense of isolation and performativity that permeates intimate spaces and routines of Western societies. Jonah has received several local and national grants in his home country of Germany, most recently a travel grant to the US by the state of Bavaria. His works are part of the collection of contemporary art of the Federal Republic of Germany and have been exhibited at various institutions and galleries in Germany and abroad. Take it away, Jonah.
Thank you, Alicia, for the introduction, and thank you, Pen Art, for inviting us. In my presentation, I will introduce my artistic practice and show you some of my previous work. I've decided to concentrate on 3 key areas for this: landscape, figuration, and abstraction. I hope that these pretty vague keywords will still help me to better explain my current interests and what I expect to guide my work at Pen Art in the next weeks. In today's world, and especially in Western society, screens play a crucial part in most professions as well as life outside of work. I use screens for a variety of reasons: to look up paintings online, to read the news, or to prepare presentations of my work, like the one that you're experiencing right now. The paintings that I'm showing you right now belong to a body of work titled Blue Light that I started in 2022. The landscapes in this series reference the pre-installed wallpapers of Apple's Mac OS operating system. The scene I painted here is based on a memory of my partner kind of starting up his computer late at night in order to answer an email, an important email. When I experience a moment like this that I want to paint, I usually try to make like a quick note or take a photo, or maybe even do like a small sketch in my sketchbook, describing like the basic elements of the painting that I have in mind. So in this case, it would be like, okay, there's the landscape, there are the icons that are kind of covering the whole screen, and then there is kind of this silhouette obstructing the view of the complete landscape. Later on in my studio, I look up more images online or in books that kind of might be relevant to the idea I have, and I collect all of this different material. And then when I feel like I have enough, I kind of start working on the final motif for the painting. When I start a new body of work, I tend to do multiple takes or variations on a similar motif. Repeating and making these variations helps me think things through, kind of, it helps me get to the bottom of the idea. But when I put all of these works or paintings together for a show, I also believe that it encourages the viewer to see them as a body of work rather than individual pieces. My paintings often reference each other, so there might be elements that I take from one painting and bring it into another painting, or similar motifs, or even just like moods that kind of follow through my paintings. And I understand shows as an opportunity to kind of put together these very simple narratives and stories that unite or form kind of loose associations between the paintings. During my time in the United States, I've had the chance to visit some of the landscapes that I painted in these paintings. So, for instance, I crossed the Rocky Mountains, I drove through Monument Valley, and I also hiked through Arches National Park, where I had this weird experience of just kind of like feeling I was in one of the Looney Tunes cartoons that I've been watching as a kid. And I also experienced several James Turrell skyscapes in different museums. I visited Georgia O'Keeffe's museum in Santa Fe. I saw the Hudson River School paintings in the Met and the dioramas at the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Even though all of these moments are pretty much incomparable, I think they still all address concepts and ideas that revolve around landscape. I'm kind of curious to start processing and kind of working on these new experiences that I made at Pen Art, and possibly also start feeding them back into my own approach to landscape painting. Another recurring element in my paintings are figures. In this painting from 2021, for instance, the figure is seen from above, so you can't really see or recognize his face and his expression. The figures in blue lights were also mostly silhouettes or extremely cropped by the frame. And even when figures are kind of more visible in my work, or have been more visible in my work, they still remain pretty much anonymous. This is an example of a painting I did pretty shortly before leaving for the US. And I had started kind of constructing these maybe more specific narratives, even though they still remain pretty simple. And in doing so, the protagonists of my paintings began to demand kind of more attention. And now, having kind of seen a lot of painting, a lot of figurative painting during my time here, I also saw how figuration was more consciously linked to ideas of representation, so ideas of who is represented and by whom. And I've become more sensitive to the fact that I kind of want to know more about the characters that I'm painting. And I also want to, like, I'm asking myself, like, how do I relate to them? How do I want the viewer to relate to the figures in my paintings? Do I want them to become more personable and kind of more recognizable? Or maybe do they need to become even more schematic and maybe even more abstract and anonymous? So these questions are kind of another work site that I want to work on during my time at Pen Art. I've also begun painting more animals, like this dog that is observing the guy doing virtual yoga. And in the past month, I've had, on the one hand, some like pretty beautiful experiences in nature of observing animals that I'd never seen before. But I've also kind of noticed animals in paintings, especially dogs in paintings in different museums that I visited, or like cats and dogs pop up regularly on our feed, or on my feed at least. And I took a lot of photos of dogs in the cities that I visited in LA and New York and Seattle. And so I've got like a pretty big collection of like these animals, and especially dogs right now. And I think it's pretty interesting to think of an animal as kind of a counterpart, or like another element for a painting, because they kind of bring a different energy to a painting. And I'm kind of now starting to think about possible compositions with like humans and animals kind of set in these intimate spaces. And yeah, that's also another type of figure that I'm thinking about right now. Okay, on to the next project, which are these pretty small, like watercolor paintings. They are kind of this size that I made in September during my residency at the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. And here you can see an installation shot of a solo show I did in New York at Strobe, which was titled Moody Layouts. In each painting, I've arranged figures and objects inside a grid of plaid patterns. The paintings are more intimate and they also feel more deliberately composed compared to my previous work. Including multiple figures in one painting also adds a conversational element to the composition. I'm keen to further explore this kind of relational aspect between the figures, but also between the abstract and the representational elements in the painting. The plaid patterns also give me this opportunity to think and play and work with color and abstract composition, something that I think I have used before, but not really explored completely. So that's something that I'm looking forward to doing. Okay, let's finish off with this slide that has a lot of information. So I was talking about landscape, figuration, and abstraction. I think these kind of buzzwords, I used them in order to give you kind of a general idea of what's on my mind right now, what I'm thinking about and what I want to explore. During my time at Pen Art, I want to dig into the experiences and into this archive of images that I've collected in the past few months. And I want to go through the photos, the notes, and the sketches that I've done and kind of start maybe thinking and even working on new motifs for new paintings. I hope I can share some of those ideas or maybe even paintings with you guys on December 12th, which is the date of our open studios. And I'm happy and glad that you joined me today. So thank you for listening, and I hope to see you around. Bye.
Thank you, Jonah. Also in residence, we have Cristen Shea. Cristen Shea is an artist, educator, curator, and surfer from Indiana who works in sculpture and computer simulation to create uncanny interludes between the real and the virtual. Cristen studied at the School of the Art Institute Chicago and Rhode Island School of Design before receiving an MFA in Visual Arts from Columbia University in 2022. Their thesis work emerged from the synthesis of a year's worth of research conducted around Gary, Indiana, while surfing on Lake Michigan during the 2020 shutdown. Cristen is based in New York and Rhode Island and has recently launched the inaugural exhibition of Tiffany Street, a curatorial project out of their home in Providence. I'll hand it off to them.
Hi, so I'm Cristen, and I'm going to start with some older work and just go in chronological order. In 2019, I was invited to a residency at the artist collective Hamtramck Ceramic in Detroit, which culminated in my first solo exhibition, Cloth Clown, presenting a body of work loosely based on a story about a haunted rug at my father's childhood home, also in Detroit. I rendered this story as a 3D animation as well as material objects. I needle felted a sculptural version of the rug with wool batting. For the 3D animation, I recorded sound from the needle felting process and mixed it with sampled stock horror sound effects for the audio. This is a work that I started in my first year at Columbia, but was interrupted by the COVID shutdown. So I didn't actually finish it until when I returned in 2021 after a year-long leave of absence. These are found objects from the banks of the Hudson in West Harlem, presented and rendered in 3D. The 3D rendering is rear projected from inside the box alongside the physical objects. At the onset of the COVID shutdown, I took a leave of absence from Columbia and returned to my childhood home in Indiana, and I made this work. There was a highway that went along the edge of the backyard, and I never realized how loud it was growing up, but the contrast between the quietness in the early days of the shutdown and the strangely persistent traffic on the highway made it even more noticeable. I recorded the sound of the highway and played it through a subwoofer inside this dresser I constructed. The glasses on top are empty candle votives that I collected from my childhood home. I left my childhood home about 2 months into the pandemic and found a place to rent in the Indiana Dunes on Lake Michigan. This is when I started surfing on the lake and found myself immersed in this liminal landscape at the intersection of land and water, characterized by sand dunes, erosion, and the steel industry. So that's an excerpt from a video that I showed as part of my thesis exhibition at Columbia. And so this is just material that I collected over the course of my year-long leave of absence living in the Indiana Dunes. So this work is a sculptural rendering of some architectural ruins that fell subject to erosion and remained partially submerged on the beach during the entire duration of my time there. I think of the sculpture as falling somewhere between the original object and the digital rendering of it. So the form is constructed out of tinted hydrogel cast in sand that I collected from the dunes. In this work, I used materials and processes from surfboard construction to produce a material 3D rendering of this object that washed up on the beach in the Indiana Dunes. This sculpture integrates the architecture from the steel mill with the mundane task of drying one's wetsuit after a surf. On the right is a detail of a digital rendering of the steel mill shown in a light box opposite from the video installation. And this is the installation of the work for the Columbia thesis exhibition. A digital rendering of the installation is shown on a screen looking into the room as if you were able to see through this wall. And this is kind of a way to call attention to the viewer's perspective within this simulated landscape and location in space and time.
Thank you so much, Cristen. It was a pleasure to hear from both of you today. Toward the end of their residency, we will be hosting an in-person end-of-session studio tour. If any of you tuning in are in the area, I hope you will join us and see what Jonah and Cristen have been working on during their time with us. In the meantime, please follow us on social media for more behind the scenes updates. Thank you.